Hello, everyone. This is Rudy Potenzone. Welcome to the I2B2 tranSMART Foundation Community Meeting for September 2020. This session is being recorded and it will be available on the website within a day or two. About the website, some of you may have noticed the last day or two we've had a couple of problems and you're getting some errors potentially with security. We're working on it. We do have a valid SSL certificate on the website, but for some reason it's sometimes not recognizing it. And we are actively working with the vendor to sort this out, and hopefully we'll have it fixed within a couple of hours. If you clear your cache, your browser cache, this does help, it seems. So just if you'd just be patient, we'll try to get this resolved quickly. This is the agenda for today, and I will turn it over to Diane, who will start with the first item. Diane?
Hi, everyone. So I just want to give you a quick update on the European Symposium that we're going to be having on November 9th. So Rudy can go to the next slide. I think, as I said last month, this is going to be a virtual symposium. I'm afraid we're going to have virtual symposiums for the foreseeable future, at least from the foundation. It's on November 9th. It's going to be a one-day. Instead of our normal two-day symposium, the planning committee decided on one day. It's going to feature the European user group has been the group that's been putting together the agenda. And then the foundation, and they're really responsible for the content, the majority of the content, and the foundation will provide logistical support. So the next slide is just a one-pager, very high-level draft agenda. And I know Ulrich Sachs is on the call. So Ulrich, if you know, let me walk through this, but if you have suggestions as well, please, I want you to be able to chime in here. So it's broken up into a number of four different sessions. One is use cases. We wanted to focus on a number of use cases, particularly focused on tranSMART. So we have a wonderful use case from the University of Michigan that uses tranSMART to support their kidney studies. Becky Stack will do that. And then Scott Wages will do the UBioPret, which is a project that was funded a while ago, and he will talk about lessons learned and then sustainability and how do you really sustain these big funded projects after the funding goes away, which is really important. So we're really recruiting for, you know, a couple of additional folks to talk about their work. So we'd love to have volunteers for that. We will have a sponsor update. There's a number of sponsors that really work within supporting the foundation and also particularly supporting the European groups that will talk about their companies. And then we'll have this COVID-19 panel, which I think everybody's working on COVID-19. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring together some of the activities that are happening across the US and Europe. So we'll talk about what's happening in the US, and we're going to cover a number of different areas, not just one. There's about 4 different areas that we'll cover and talk about what they're doing and how they're similar and how they're different. And then we also have somebody from Germany and also somebody from Italy that will talk about the work that they're doing. Paul Aviak will do a talk on pediatrics. There's a lot happening in the area of pediatrics. Unfortunately, the numbers are growing, and so they're trying to really do analysis around pediatrics. And then a roundtable open discussion about what people think we need to do moving forward. And then the next piece will be an update from the foundation. We'll talk about the Dell projects and the updates that we're making around those areas, and then the roadmaps. So I know that European community is we'll talk about I2B2, but I know Europeans are very keen on really understanding where we're going with tranSMART. So they will be heavily focused on tranSMART. So Rudy or Ulrich, do you have any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, my mic is open, yeah. So I think we should do two important things in the European meeting. The one is that people using tranSMART should come out of a stealth mode. So we figure that tranSMART is used heavily in some projects, but the PIs cannot report about it. So that's what we need, some sign that tranSMART is live and kicking in the projects. It's sometimes difficult to make people to speak up. So if you have a nice system up and running, volunteer for talking about it. The second thing is the lesson we learned from last year's meeting in Europe. So people really want to know what's in the 2021 model. So what can we expect, or what is maybe not showtime ready, what will not be ready for use next year. But it's important because we see lots of projects coming up now. Lots of designs being set up now, and I want tranSMART to be in there, and therefore we need information about what's there, how's the community, will it be there in 2025 when those projects end. I think that's strategically very important now.
Great, thank you, Ulrich.
Thanks, Ulrich. This is Rudy. Just to let you know that we do have a webpage, or a couple on the meeting set up. Hopefully it'll be available. The website will be back and running well. And also, if you have use cases, you can enter there your ideas for what you would present. So please go to the website and see that. Alternatively, you can email any of us, but especially Ulrich or Diane, if you have a use case that you'd like to present.
Maybe one last sentence to the use case.
Yep.
I like the COVID-19 panel a lot. At first, I was a little bit careful because everything is COVID-19 right now. But I think it's important because this is a catalyst showing what's working and what's not working. So I think I2B to tranSMART is very, very useful in collecting data from federated sites to show the metadata which is available in order to work on the data. So I think this is a wonderful use case, and we should point out what's working better with using I2B to tranSMART. I think that's a very unique opportunity, and our German colleague Uli Prokosch will present the German activities. But I think Sean knows the project and the German side of it, but it's good to talk to discuss about it. What else would be needed to make things easier?
Definitely. Great, thank you.
Terrific, thank you, Ulrich and Rudy. So that's what I had. I think Rudy, I think you're next up for the.
So, yeah. Okay, so we do have a COVID-19 project funded by Dell, and this is around tranSMART. The foundation is working closely with Axiomatics on putting together an instance of tranSMART version 19 that will be available in the cloud on AWS and available for people to use and try out. This is the core team working on the project, people from Axiomatics, myself, and Zami Temestin from the Mayo Clinic, who's an infectious disease expert, is advising us as we work through this. Our goal here is to put up a public resource that includes tranSMART, but also loading sets of data that are available and publicly available. And so we're loading data from not only coronavirus, but SARS and MERS that we can find largely from GEO. And we're also going to be soliciting contributions from the community. Largely, these are RNA-seq data sets that have been made publicly available, but also looking for other types of data. And the idea of this site is to show, to put tranSMART, make tranSMART available. These data sets are already loaded, and you can look at them and examine, do some analysis of them. And then if you're interested, these look like they're useful in your research, you can then download the data and bring it into your own tranSMART sites. Right now, these are the data sets, numbers of data sets that we have loaded. And as I say, a lot of these are expression RNA-seq data and a few other types. and we're putting up a staging server that will have all these available. Hopefully, this will be publicly available within 2 weeks or so. And once we have that, we will announce it. This just shows, hard to see, but that the data sets are all loaded. These are all tranSMART folders. Within them, I'll open up one of them on the screenshot, and you can see it actually has data associated with the different types of information that's there. Some of it's high dimensional data, some of it's about the samples and related information. And this hopefully will all be available soon. Now, in trying to expand what we're doing, we're also planning to hold a virtual datathon, and we're targeting November 18th to 20th for this. And this is where we're inviting people to attend who have interest in using tranSMART, maybe data scientists, people working on the viruses, maybe have your own data that you want to bring, and bring the group together in this 3-day intense analysis group where people will self-organize into teams of about 5 people, and each team will pick their own project, whether it be here's some ideas about trying to find new biomarkers or some common pathways, et cetera. And each team will set themselves a goal on day 1. They'll work each team will have their own AWS instance of tranSMART, all these data sets and some other tools, as well as potentially some of our experts available to help use the tools that are there as they try to solve a particular problem around COVID-19 that's of their interest. We do have a web page for sign up when the web comes back. We've got a description of the datathon, what we're hoping for and pulling together. And there will be some sponsorships and some awards given to the teams that have the best presentation. This is the organizing committee. We're working with, it's a joint with Axiometics, Mayo Clinic. Zami is working with us, and Nabetta Darath from the Open Science Pharma Foundation, OSPF. And so we're trying to pull all this together. As I say, we've got a brochure that we can share with you if you want to have a little bit more information. But the websites will be the best place to go to learn more. The project server is going to have tranSMART 19, and then all of the data sets that are here, and we'll make it available again, hopefully within the next 2 weeks. And so, happy to answer any questions about it, but we're working to, announce all of this, make it all available. You can now sign up on the website, and then we'll be holding training webinars that will go over both tranSMART version 19 to show what's available, and also a second webinar which will go through what the data sets are that we have available and some of the tools, other tools that we may have. So we're talking to a number of folks to provide some additional resources, compute capabilities, et cetera, and we'll let you know about that as soon as we have that organized. So that's what I had. And we can answer any questions about it, maybe at the end. But now I'll invite Jim Campbell, who's leads the ontology working group. Jim, did you want to run the slides yourself?
Good morning. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, you sound fine.
Yeah, may I share my screen?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. You should be able to share.
It says you disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. You should be able to share now. Sorry about that.
There we go. Are you seeing my slide set?
Yes, they look fine.
I would like to just update the group on a proposal that we're working on right now for tooling in support of I2B2 metadata. For those of you who may not be intimately involved with I2B2, Most times people call them ontologies, but basically they are metadata sets that organize the function of the I2B2 client, specifically supporting searching, categorizing, and counting data that's located in the observation fact star schema. The star schema is indexed on 2 items, concept dimension and modifier dimension, which basically are meant to point to external ontologies, terminologies, metadata systems that help to classify and aggregate the facts in the database along independent knowledge-based means. So for example, here you see a picture of our recent deployment of Loink lab results. And in this metadata hierarchy that we have deployed, you can use the folders, or you can use the little icons that appear as folders as drag and drop search tools, which basically do terminologic aggregation or subsumption or identifying all of the concepts that are children of the concept that you choose. And therein, they basically deploy the utilities of the reference terminology or ontology into the I2B2 data management scheme. Collectors are the topmost nodes, in this case, lab results. Folders are basically concept nodes that have children and can be searched for aggregation. And leaf nodes are basically at the bottom of the hierarchy, if you will, and have no descendants. Here in Nebraska, we have had lots of difficulties over the years deploying and keeping our I2B2 ontologies up to date and useful. And so we, within the ontology work group, we've embarked upon a project to basically set up tool sets and documentation that would support at least the core of standard ONC terminology metadata, so that for the US participants at least, all of the ontologies would be supported in a current, comprehensive, and historic form. Now, we're also a PCORNet data mart, as are most of our colleagues. And so in order to try and minimize the amount of duplicate work that we have to do, since those terminologies are also reference knowledge sources in manipulation of the PCORNet common data model, we set out to basically deploy some tooling that would support both I2B2 and common and CDM implementation and use of terminologies. And some of the requirements, as I mentioned, are that these need to be comprehensive, meaning that they have to have all of the codes that have been published by the Standards Development Organization. They should, the tool should support a rapid build so that we could make it easy for our sites to stay current with what is otherwise a relatively frequent maintenance cycle within these standards development organizations. And we want to be able to support the full knowledge-based features of these terminologies for I2B2, for analytics, and for decision support. As a part of this proposal, we're suggesting a terminology metadata maintenance cycle that basically would organize and standardize the way that we distribute terminology to our I2B2 and CDM sites. And it begins with acquiring the terminology updates from the SDOs, building a set of relationship tables, deploying procedures that will basically build metadata tables from those relationship groups. Populating the I2B2 ontology cell, which is necessary so that it's actually deployed in I2B2. Then fact counting, validating, and also building a master site-specific data inventory or data dictionary that can be used by the community of use at that site to effectively employ the terminology in their query builds. So this proposal basically begins with where we get the terminologies. And over the years, we have had numerous experiments where we have demonstrated that UMLS does not publish basically comprehensive and historic terminology reference resources with full relationship data that can be used for this type of activity. So we basically turn to the SDOs for the sources. SNOMED CT is released twice yearly in the US by the National Library of Medicine, which is our release center. In Nebraska, we have integrated SNOMED with LOINC and RxNorm into a comprehensive ontology concept model that has been suggested by Keith Campbell and the Solar group, so that we can build LOINC and RxNorm ontologies as well. So our SNOMED CT is basically the platform, if you will, on which we build an integrated complex ontology for US healthcare. LOINC is published twice a year by Regenstrief Institute. It's a flat file with no ontologic features of substance. Basically, in our build, we do deploy a full ontology of LOINC. RxNorm is published monthly by the National Library of Medicine. One of our staff, co-author on this presentation, Jay Pedersen, has spent a lot of time building APIs to NLM RxNav site to basically grab current and historical RxNorm data. And we have worked with the FDA archives to basically build a history file for NDC codes. And of course, ICD-10-CM is published by NCHS, comes out with updates in October. We use the XML release from the Center for Disease Control. In this process, those sources are built into relationship tables by a set of procedures which run very quickly and basically harvest all of the relationship information that we can manage from these references. And they are built into a relationship table for each terminology resource. So SNOMED, LOINC, RxNorm, and ICD-10-CM at this time. Those relationship tables basically organize into SQL format the data that is useful from those terminologies in terms of relaying the ontologic framework, if you will, allowing us to build metadata metadata ontologies for I2B2. Now in ICD-10-CM, that's very simple. A supertype concept such as asthma, J45, is related to all of its children, grandchildren, etc., such as J45.3, mild persistent asthma. RxNorm is much more complicated because of the fact that RxNorm is not an ontology and has never been intended to be one. But over the past 3 to 4 years, we have worked with Jeff Klan and Michelle Morris and others to basically identify the important relationships from the RxNorm tables. And what we deploy right now in our tables for medications include ingredient to clinical drugs. So what are the active ingredients in this clinical drug? What are the active ingredients that are found in this particular package code? What are the clinical drugs that may be found in this package code? And then finally, we have deployed classes. So all of the VA drug classes, as well as some from ATC and a number of others that we have built for pragmatic use cases, are basically defined based upon their ingredients and their dose forms. So for example, the VA drug class for topical ophthalmic miotics basically consists of those with ingredient of acetylcholine that have a dose form like ophthalmic. SNOMED CT is a robust ontology, has lots of relationships that we do not harvest in their entirety, but we do use the ISO relationships, which basically build the hierarchical structures of all of the major SNOMED hierarchies. And finally, LOINC, based upon our build following the SOLOR model, we have a true ontology of LOINC, laboratory and clinical. Here you see an example which relates the observation result of eosinophils in sputum by manual method to a parent eosinophils in sputum. We published a paper 5 years ago. I noticed that Hubert Hickman is on the call. He and Jay are co-authors on this, where we explained how such tables, which we call transitive closure tables, can be deployed in I2B2 to support actually more efficient and rapid searching of very large databases. So those relationship tables are in turn used in the I2B2 metadata construction. And here you see an example where there's a folder search for asthma in SNOMED CT conditions. And in the metadata table, we have changed the like operator to equals and are basically searching for subtype codes where the supertype concept happens to be asthma. And in that way, we have used basically the tooling that has been present in I2B2 since its inception, but in a slightly different fashion in terms of deploying these terminologies in terms of I2B2 metadata. One of the points I made early on, however, is that these tables can support not only terminology management in I2B2, but also the common data model, where here, for example, we're basically looking for conditions of asthma in a SQL deployment using the PCORNet common data model, identifying those that are available with a modifier code of chief complaint, medical history, or problem list. So in terms of where the project is today, we have deployed, tested, and are actually using reference terminology metadata sets for I2B2 for these 4 major domains. And we're proposing that we would basically support these for the I2B2 community at large. An important additional step, which is often overlooked in using I2B2 metadata, especially for observational data, is the importance of supporting query by value. And that requires a feature of the metadata called metadata XML. And I apologize for not explaining that in more detail right now, but it's out of scope. Suffice it to say that we have a metadata XML library that we have built at Nebraska that we are deploying within our laboratory and clinical data set, metadata sets, so that this query by value in I2B2 can be supported. Now, these procedures do all of the work of getting metadata to work in I2B2. So they build the metadata after the relationship tables are available. Then they populate the CRC and ontology cells, creating concept dimension and modifier dimension, and employ new modifier-based fact counting, which our colleague Jay Pedersen has developed. Modifier-based fact counting basically applies the modifiers that are relevant to a particular metadata hierarchy when it employs the fact counting itself, so that, for example, in SNOMED CT, if you're looking for problem list, you don't want to be counting those instances where the SNOMED code happens to be deployed in family history. Speaking with Jeff Klan a week or two ago, he told me that he didn't know of anybody that had implemented this. I just mention it as one feature of the tooling that we are proposing. So the metadata XML library right now amounts to about 1,255 codes. We have something under 3,000 LOINC codes deployed in our database today. So we've got a ways to go in terms of supporting query by value for everything that we currently use, but you know, we've got a pretty good start on that, basically. The four metadata tables, I just want to highlight briefly. SNOMED CT basically employs the hierarchies of clinical findings, events, and situations, and supports SNOMED coded problem list, past medical history, chief complaint, allergy reaction codes, and family history. And since it's SNOMED CT, it's not surprising that it's large. As a part of our metadata procedures, all of our metadata is built with provenance nodes, so that if you go into I2B2 and reveal hidden terms, you'll find the information about when this extract was done and when the terminology publication was released. Something that, you know, is not easy to do right now in I2B2 today. LOINC metadata, as I mentioned, is based upon an integrated ontology concept model, including SNOMED and RX norm. At Nebraska, we have been doing a lot of research work on cancer medicine. And so it includes anatomic and molecular pathology, all clinical lab tests that are currently in use, as far as we can determine, in the US, a number of popular panel codes, and tumor observables. And out of the 65,000 LOINC concepts, there are 32,000 or so in this ontology today. And the ontology build basically is built on the skeleton of the ISR relationships, but we have a full ontologic model, which means it's possible to query LOINC databases based upon the metadata alone, if you wish to do that. RX norm and NDC basically employs ingredients, clinical drugs, which are these 5 RX CUI TTYs, NDC package codes, and drug classes. And you can see that there's a large number of package codes that are available. I can tell you that a big fraction of them are no longer in use in the US healthcare system, but we all have these codes in our databases. And so that's why we've been insisting on absolute historicity in terms of the build of these metadata tables. And you see below the inventory of the number of relationships that are employed in building these tables. ICD-10-CM is pretty standard. We're updated right now with the 2021 release that is due for October of 2020. Has about 110,000 concepts right now, and is a strict mono hierarchy. Now, some of the lessons we've learned at Nebraska about using metadata in I2B is it's complicated to install. It's also frequently error prone. So we're including a validation step that would basically run a set of predetermined sequels on the database once a site has deployed their data, and compare that against the fact counting for validation. We've also found that understanding how to use the terminology at your site is frequently a difficulty. Now, some recent improvements in I2B2 make it easier to search for terminology in I2B2, but it has never been facile, I think it's fair to say. In addition, every time we roll out a new cycle, and we do it for PCORNet at least quarterly, the community of use has the challenge of knowing what is in the database and what they can actually use from these gigantic ontologies. So we've included a semantic data inventory tool that builds a terminology master table, which is a site-specific inventory of standard coded terminology that's deployed at the site. And it's indexed by a lot more terms and keywords so that it's easier to look up concepts, review their frequency in your database by semantic type, data frequency, and where it came from in the electronic health record. And we've supplemented this at Nebraska with our terminology reference tables, so that when this user who's researching a project on smoking looks through what's available in Nebraska Medicine Data Mart by semantic type, they see that they've got prescription drugs that are used for smoking cessation. They see they've got counseling events. They see they've got clinical problem list of data and the like. And if they want to happen to research, for example, the utility of this bupropion oral tablet for smoking cessation, they can basically use the hypertext link that you see right there and go and get a list of package codes and the ingredient code that are available, that are actually deployed in our database for that particular clinical drug. So the proposal to the ontology work group right now is that we think these procedures would have benefit to the wider community. We'd like to deploy documentation of the metadata deployment procedures to our ontology wiki, move to GitHub the table builds, including the relationship tables and the metadata tables. And we're also suggesting that that we would maintain timestamp terminology reference releases in GitHub that can allow the I2B2 community to always look back and see, well, what was the status of such and such a concept in RxNorm or SNOMED CT in, July of 2020. So that's the proposal as it stands right now. Some of the features that these procedures would add for the site that wants to actually use the build process would be that they would actually install and validate and fact count the metadata when it is built. Whereas the current procedures that are widely practiced are basically sharing a CSV file that then the user community basically has to deploy. So that's the extent of what I wanted to share, and I will stop talking now. Rudy?
Thanks, Jim. We can open up now for questions for Jim. I think anyone can unmute themselves and ask a question. Sean, I noticed you were unmuting.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that there weren't other, maybe more relevant questions, but let me just, in terms, Jim, of follow-up steps with putting it on a GitHub and making the CSV tables available, you know, one of the things we've always kind of lacked in I2B2 is a central coordinating center, which this would be a very appropriate part of. And, you know, that kind of maintenance, you know, might be something that would take some funding. And I noticed that we have some of our most heavily invested folks, perhaps from industry, on the call. I see Dave Diamond, I see Chi Lee. And so thinking, and maybe Diane, you might want to reflect on this, and Rudy, in terms of, I mean, is there a way that we could perhaps position a kind of, you know, I2B2 tranSMART coordinating center? Because that would allow us to, you know, make sure that Jim's vision is, and I should say, without this vision that Jim has, you know, it's very difficult for sites to kind of do these things on their own. And it's very critical for the operation of I2B2 and tranSMART, but yet, you know, there's so many folks, right? We have like 300 sites using I2B2 and tranSMART, all kind of doing what they can. You know, Jim and Jay, both, you know, I know that you started this about 3 years ago or more. It's really, you know, shown tremendous benefit to the community, and you know, these tables are kind of, you know, some of the gold that we have, you know, to operate the community. So I don't know, what, just in terms of an open discussion about, you know, how that might, you know, be realized.
And I think that's, I mean, it's a really good point. You know, how do you get your arms around funding for something like that? I know Matthew from TriNetX is also a pretty active participant in the ontology working group. So, you know, TriNetX, you know, might also be a leader in trying to support this, since they're you know, wrestling with this themselves. So something we should definitely you know, talk about. I do invite people to join the ontology working group. It's become probably one of the most active working groups at this point. And you know, if you want to join, you can. There's a sign-up sheet on the website, or you know, anybody can just email me directly as well. And one of the things we're trying to do about with the working groups, if you don't want to become a regular member, we're going to be adding information about the meetings just directly on the website. So with the Zoom information, so if you just want to, you know, drop into a meeting once in a while, that's totally fine too. You don't have to go through the process of signing up and becoming a permanent member.
Absolutely. You know, I also noticed Michelle's on the call, and Michelle's done a tremendous amount of not only, you know, building these kinds of ontologies, but also distributing them with a GitHub. I'm wondering, you know, how we can maybe put that together. I mean, I you know, it's like, okay, so of all these things, what's the first thing that seems like we need? And that is, okay, establishing a GitHub that makes sense for where people can go, right? And I know Michelle runs the one for the ACT ontology. And obviously, you know, these are hand in hand activities. And I kind of even see different tiers of ontologies where, you know, you can have a super basic ontology, something we've never even considered, I think, but something that I find might be helpful for some of our users where, you know, it just has the most basic diagnosis codes and so forth. And, you know, the scientists and clinicians that use that, a lot of times they're not informaticians. They don't even know what the medical record is. They just want to, like, you know, find some patients that they can, you know, either get samples for and, you know, so forth. So, or do some data mining, you know, and they've got some people on their team. So I think that, you know, it just, you know, you can have think of a tier of a super kind of basic ontology that's even less than anything we have currently, has kind of the top layers of the hierarchies only. And then the second would be something more fluid and that we're using in ACT, for example, that has a lot of the kind of basic constructs in it. And then, you know, what Jim's done, and Jay, is really some absolutely I mean, you know, to the point that, you know, we can actually think of this as a true informatics kind of venture, far beyond even what's in UMLS, because, you know, without these historic terms, you know, you can't do real queries in historic data warehouses, which is what we all have, or what many of us have. So, you know, having this, and I think that, you know, having this on the same GitHub, Michelle, as ACT, you know, could enable like you to kind of take a cut of that and then maybe cut up into the more, you know, basic ones that, you know, folks might. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just kind of.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Sean. I would reflect that, you know, when we first started the discussion in the ontology work group of the scope of what we should be supporting, you know, we're very parochial in the US. And our ICD-10 CM deployment, you know, we call it ICD-10, but it isn't. It's actually a derivative of something that is in use worldwide, which is ICD-10. And, you know, we explored with those members who had interests in Europe as to what ontologies they would like to see supported. But we never got a lot of traction in that discussion. And I hope that maybe this today points to the need to, you know, developing this more global view of how we should be managing these ontologies. Because no question, here at Nebraska, we're going to support our own user community, but we basically want to work with and interoperate with, you know, our colleagues in Europe and across the world.
And let me just ask Ulrich, so even in the medication codes, there's a separate coding system called ATS, maybe?
ATC, yeah.
ATC, thank you.
So I see a lot of overlap. So right now I'm preparing a talk for the SNOMED CT Expo, where we talk about the German SNOMED CT license. Finally, we got something, yeah, which is not really, but not the whole license nationwide, but we're thinking about some governance processes. And I like the talk between Loink and SNOMED CT a lot. We're facing similar problems, similar challenges. For example, expressing a COVID-19 result from virology, which you cannot express in Loink, but you have to map it to SNOMED CT. And so I think we're pretty much on the same line here. Just and we would like to learn about the governance processes, because I think that's the difficult thing. Coming up with Excel sheets and some nice value sets is not the problem, but how to, you know, finalize them, how to get them on the road.
I mean, I guess it's a problem, but the smart, bright people on the call have solved a lot of that, including you Ulrich, including you know, Jim and Michelle and so forth. And now the question is about coordination So that's why the thinking of a kind of coordinating effort.
I
But one that,
see. And so just I have had some experience before, and as Sean know, that many years ago at Partners Healthcare, we used to have a committee called the CCC and Content Curation Critical Content Committee. It is a very important aspects of it where the content is actually very important for not only clinical decision support, but also for the population health reportings. And so at that time, there were tools to facilitate these decision making. Now I'm showing some kind of age here by talking about Documentum. And as you know, they change hands many times. And of course, whether the product's still there, we don't know. But there's definitely content decision sort of making tools that can help to facilitate that curation process. And secondly is I think there are specialty more of an ontology company out there that if they could participate into the let's say the broader ITB2 the foundation community, and I think they could also offer up some versions of their content curation tools, and as a contribution to the community that will get you at least some industrial strength tools that you can work with, and as a baseline. And also I was quite interested in, we have been looking at, for example, VSAT, value set, that was authored and managed by the government. And of course, it's a very US centric, but the information is organized, the way it's searched, it was actually quite helpful, albeit that it is mostly for quality reporting. But the disease definition, combining multiple codes and this and that, that's a commonly asked for use case. And it is a fairly good way to organize them. But that came from the VSAC aspects of it. And lastly, I would say that for us, even from InterSystem point of view, it is also difficult to have to have a content maintenance as a ask for anybody. I mean, it is a special set of skills and new processes. And even if we package as a product offering, I was thinking if we have a product-centric view, which, for example, focus on the COVID-19, that actually could help with some of the focus regarding what content needs to be, or ontology-related content needs to be managed. That will help us to maybe minimize the scope a little bit. At least we have a starter set that has a common interest among the group of researchers out there.
yeah, those are great thoughts, Chi. I mean, it seems like we could even just progress in some stages, getting this work on a central kind of or coordinated GitHub. When you mentioned, by the way, companies managing ontologies, Matthew, that's a little bit of that's quite a great job they do. Anyway, so I just think that yeah, so this would be a nice thing to develop, and necessary, and it's great work. All right.
A quick comment I just posted on the chat. It's German, so it's not might be translated in the article set. So it is. There's a translation for the second link. This is our collection on COVID-19 data sets, including several different data sets, and it's a combination of LOINC, SNOMED, CT, because we realized one ontology, it has to comprise different terminologies, and that's what we use for balloting, HL7 style, and get the input from the domain experts in order to come up with the data set. But it's very difficult, and it's ongoing since month right now, so it's evolving. So now it's called Gecko Plus because the first version was not good enough. You see, yeah, I apologize, but I think the flag in the right upper corner might translate some of the content. This helps us discussing a lot because people can click in and see what we thought about what the domain experts brought in. And we have a German basic data set containing different modules, and module by module they're balloted in HL7. It's, yeah, here you see even the translation. It's important for us because we want to reach out in Europe as well. So you see some ICD-10 mapping on SNOMED CT terms for the most important concepts. It's a big effort.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very nice.
What I could do, we got a working group on interoperability. I could bring up the topic and try to pull in some of those people which are already, you know, active worldwide into this ontology working group. I cannot promise anything because those people are really busy, but I think it would be worth.
If we're not presenting this already, this would be a great thing to present at the European meeting.
Yeah, actually, I was going to suggest to Ulrich that if they are interested, I think that talking briefly about where we have been going with ontology development and standardization, and soliciting European involvement in the work group would be, I think, a great idea.
Yeah, I will reach out to Sylvia Thun. That's the one, yeah, being most active and socially accepted in the community, and she's really a very good multiplier. And maybe you know her. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sean's suggestion of getting an oncology session on the European symposium is absolutely right on. So
yeah, she'd be great. That would be a good idea.
That's just, I think that's the perfect addition to that meeting. Thank you, Sean. Well, this is really fantastic, Jim. I really appreciate you coming and spending the time here. I really do think we need to broaden the ontology working group and really start to focus on some of these things. And certainly looking at an international focus is going to be important. I know we're a little bit over. Any other last minute questions here? The group? If not, I know everybody's jumping to either lunchtime or another Zoom meeting, or if you're in Europe, probably the end of your day. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.